What we're going to cover today is how to manipulate your account settings and create growers. We're going to show you how to import and configure a field. We're going to go through the process of activating a field for recommendations. We'll show you how to run recommendations and export them so that you can actually apply them. And then throughout the season, you can monitor changes in those recommendations and get daily updates. We'll show you how to turn that feature on. And then finally, we'll show you where our help resources are so that if you have further questions, you can go ahead and get answers to them as quickly as possible. The goal of today's session is to give you the knowledge you need to build a field, run it, and actually make use of it. Over on the left is our navigation bar, and that's where you're going to move around the application. I'm going to start by clicking this settings link in the bottom left, the little gear icon. And this is where you're going to be able to control various parts of your Adaptan experience. For example, if you need to change your password, this is where you would come. Now, some of you may have a very slightly different view of this, and that's because we have different roles within Adaptan. We have billing administrators, who are typically those that manage the entire account for your company, and then we have agronomist users, which is typically a large set of service providers, and then we even have grower users that you can have your administrator set up. So you might see slightly different menu options, but generally speaking, this is what you're going to see. I'm going to click this user and grower list, and this is something that all billing admins have access to and some agronomists. And if you don't have access, that means your administrator is going to do this step for you. The list you see here, first of all, at the top is a list of staff members in your account. So in my case, I'm the billing administrator. In your case, you might see some additional agronomists or admins as well. Below that is a list of all growers in the system. And we use the term grower account to correspond with your grower customers. So each one of your growers should be set up in Adaptan as well, so that when you load farms and fields and zones, they can be organized by grower, as most farm management systems use that type of hierarchy. So at this point, I'm going to show you how to create and import a grower in our first field. So we can simply click this Add Grower Account button up at the top, and all you have to do is type in the name of the grower. And that would be your customer's name. And if you want to put the address in, that's fine. The only other required field, however, is the zip code, and that's so that we can center the map. So I'm going to click Return to the User and Grower list, and now you can see that that new grower that I created is here. And that's pretty much all I have to do to create the grower. What I'm going to do now is go over to the navigation bar and click this land icon. And it's going to show me a list of all the growers in the system. And here's the one I just created. And you will see field creation options displayed. Now, there are several different ways of working with boundary data in Adaptan. The simplest is this middle option, Draw on a Map, where you click the circle, you can type in an address, you can navigate around and zoom in, and you'll see all the existing common land unit boundaries pre-populated. And all you have to do is click on the one you want. You can edit it by dragging the points. You can hold Shift and add a second polygon if you'd like, and then submit the location. At this point, you're going to assign it to a farm. And now, since this is a brand new grower, there are no farms yet, so I'm going to create one. But if you had farms already, you would choose from an existing if you like, and then give the field a name. Now, every time you create a field, you have the option as far as what mode you want to operate within. And you can see point-based, zone-based, and grid-based. And field by field, you may have different desires as far as how you want to manage spatial data, so you can choose accordingly. Zone-based is our most common. That's where there's a set of management zones defined at the beginning of the process, and your configuration will populate information about those zones, and you'll end up with a recommendation that abides by those zones. Anytime you see a little icon such as this one, that means there's help information available for whatever topic you're looking at. And in this case, there's a link that's going to take us to an article on our help site. And this goes into detail on the various modes of operation. And you can see visually here the difference between point-based, zone-based, and grid-based. So I'm going to go with this middle option, zone-based. And I'm going to have the system create zones for me by soil type using the NRCS Surgo database. If you have zones in a shapefile that you'd like to use, you can simply click the shapefile button and then browse to find it. Anytime you load a shapefile into Adaptn, you're going to need to zip together the components of that shapefile and then upload the zip file to Adaptn, not the individual pieces. But I'm going to go with soil type for now, and I'm going to hit submit. And you can see running down the list here, we have 5 zones that were created based on the soil map, and you can see some basic information about them. Now, in today's example, I'm going to show you 2 different ways of configuring a field. And the first is looking at this on a zone-by-zone basis, where you may want to go into any one of these zones and click the little arrow next to the zone name and move in to the options for configuring it. So I'm going to click Land here. And for the part of the field that's highlighted in red, which is Zone 1, you can see the slope, drainage, soil texture, and rooting depth parameters that were set by default, in this case based on the soil maps and Adaptn zone database. One of the advantages to working zone by zone is you can really fine-tune things. So if you wanted to change the rooting depth for this zone, you can just click the box, choose a new value, and submit it. Over on the right, you'll see some status information about the various aspects of setting up the field. So land details, which is what we're on now, has a check mark, meaning it's already set up, but soil and crop have an exclamation mark, meaning they're not configured. So you can click into those sections and then you could fill out your tillage method, your soil test, etc. You can also click on the map to move to another zone if you like, and it'll highlight the aspect that you clicked on, and then you have the same options. Most people don't use this zone by zone process because there's a lot of data that you'd be populating, but you can certainly come back to any field and update configurations if you want to fine tune it. I'm going to go back to the fields and zones view, which is where we came from, and I'm going to talk about a different way of configuring the field that might be quicker for many of you. Adaptn has integrations with a number of other GIS-based software systems. For my next example, I'm going to demonstrate importing and configuring a field using the AgX platform provided by SST Software. Many of the concepts, however, are the same for other integrations as well. What I'm going to do now is go back to my settings for a second, and if you are one of those people that plans to use the AgX system, you're going to want to go into your settings and click this AgX settings link here. And if you don't have this option available to you, but you want to use AgX, just go ahead and send us an email at support@adaptn.com and we'll turn that on for you. There's a one-time process for connecting your Adaptn and AgX account. And all you do is you hit this green button and it will ask you for your AgX credentials. And once you've linked your accounts together, you then have access to all the growers, farms, and fields from AgX to pull those into Adaptn. So you're going to start by going to this Growers tab and importing whichever growers down at the bottom here you want to work with. Once you've done that, the growers fields are going to show up on this tab for the list of growers that you see here. So I'm going to go through this second field example using our sync with a source option and show you how to pull data in that way. And just to kind of tie the pieces together, you also can get to this page by clicking on the land link, just like we did the first time around. This is the AgX grower that I'm going to work with. And clicking this sync with a source option over on the right. For those of you who indicated that you're going to be using shapefiles, you would simply use the option on the left and again, upload your shapefile as a zip. I'm going to go with this sync with a source option on the right, and this is going to allow me to choose either one field or multiple fields using the bulk import tab to import from this grower in AgX. I'm going to go with this little Southwest 71 field in the center here. You'll notice there are some account preferences, and in my case, I have the system automatically pulling soil information, including organic matter and pH test results from AgX. I'm going to press the import button, and it's going to go off and grab the boundary for me and present me with the same field mode options and a couple additional zone creation options. And in this case, I happen to have some management zones saved in AgX that I'm going to make use of. And I've saved a couple of them. I'm going to use the one called 2017 yield zones. And I'm going to hit submit. Now this is going to look fairly similar to the first example we created. This field only has 3 zones. I've called them high, medium, and low. And we're going to go ahead and configure a field in a slightly different way than before. So I'm going to click on this configure field link. And this is a very common way of manipulating layer-based field data within Adaptn as opposed to zone-based data. So you'll see running down the left here, we have layers, soil type, slope, organic matter, prior crop, expected harvest population, yield, and tillage method. Those are the required layers of data for running an Adaptn recommendation. Down below, we have nitrogen applications, manure applications, irrigation, rooting depth, crop emergence date, soil nitrate test, and soil pH. Those are all optional layers of data, and it will depend on the field as to whether or not you want to make use of them. Now you'll see that some of these have already been set. And if I click on any one of these layer names, you'll see up at the top the current configuration data, which will update in real time. And then you'll see down in the center options for manipulating that data. And those of you that are using shapefiles, you're going to use this first option where you can upload a shapefile. Those of you wanting to sync with AgX are going to use this middle option. And then if you wanted to just set a flat value, you'd use the third option. So I'm going to go down these layers and quickly set them up. Sometimes it's just a simple question, like previous crop. What did we plant last year? I'm going to go with grain corn. Harvest population. Again, same options exist. I'll show you what the constant value looks like, where I can just choose roughly how many seeds per acre we expect at harvest time. For expected yield, again, same options exist. I'm going to go with my sync with a source option here just to show those of you who are using AgX what happens. I'm going to specify my maturity class and my planting date, and I'm just going to hit the submit button. What this is going to do is go off and retrieve from AgX all the available management zone sets that have saved yield goals in them, and then I can choose the one I want. In this case, I have one ranging from 170 to 210 and another from 180 to 210. And I'll hit submit. Those of you using shapefiles, you would simply submit either a polygon or point-based shapefile set having the yield goals in bushels per acre that you'd like for this field. And lastly, I'm going to set my tillage method. And depending on what options I choose, some of these other parameters may become available. For example, my percent prior crop residue remaining. Now at this point, I've satisfied all the configuration requirements for the field. However, I'm going to do one more thing, which is add some pre-plant nitrogen. This is something you definitely want to do if your grower has applied nitrogen already so that we can model the uptake and losses. So I'm going to use the constant value option, and I'm going to enter a spring pre-plant application. I'm going to put in 120 pounds of anhydrous ammonia, and I'm going to set it for a few days prior to planting. You're also going to set your placement depth, and if you are using an enhanced efficiency product, you can indicate which stabilizer you've applied. I'm going to go back to my fields and zones view now, again, which is where we started from. And you'll notice we have a little check mark here next to each zone indicating that it's fully configured. So now's the time we're going to go ahead and activate this field. So I'm going to click the Activate Field link, which is right here. And this is the same for all types of fields, whether you brought it in through a shapefile or AgX or the map. And you'll see there are generally going to be two options. We have what's called training mode, which has no cost associated with it. And we have the regular activate field, which does have a cost. The main difference is that when we activate into training mode, and I'm going to do that right now, you're only given access to run simulations using prior year's weather data. So I'm going to click this field rec link, which is also available on the field menu. And the system is going to tell us that we haven't run any recommendations yet. What I can do while I'm in training mode is click this calendar tool up at the top, and you'll notice that the calendar box starts last year and goes backwards. And I can click the month and then the year, and we can actually run this recommendation all the way back to 2010. But we can't run it for this year. We would need to live activate that field to run it for the current season. But this is a great way of getting a feel for the system and creating example recommendations for your growers to get them comfortable with the approach before they go to apply this year. So I'm going to choose June 1st of 2016 for now. And I'm going to click this Go button. Now, what does it mean to choose a date in the past? Well, essentially, it takes all of our management dates and moves them back temporarily based on whatever number of years in the past we're looking to look at. And it uses the actual weather data that occurred in that season up until that point. And this is basically a way of understanding what Adapten would have recommended if we had used it in 2016 with whatever field characteristics we entered. Now, while a recommendation is running, you can click this little icon above your name in the upper left, and it'll show you the status. And this one's actually just completed. But if it were still running, you'd see a percentage here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the link here, and it's going to take us to the recommendation that we ran. So we can see up at the top in this big blue box the summary of our recommendation. As of June 1st, 2016, Adapten would have recommended a minimum of 70 pounds, an average of 77, maximum of 90 pounds per acre for a total pounds needed 5,493. So that's what our variable rate recommendation would have looked like. Now, if I wanted to compare this to another year, I can simply go back and choose another date and hit the Go button. Or if I'm ready to run it live for this season, I can click this Activate link. It's going to bring me back to the activation screen. It's going to confirm that this is a live activation now. And now you'll notice that that training button is gone. I can go back to the field recommendation, and now my calendar widget goes through today. So I can basically run this recommendation for right now and say, what would we have recommended today, and hit the Go button. Once I activate a field, it's going to run automatically on a daily basis for the rest of the season. And we'll come back in just a minute and talk about how to monitor that as the season progresses. But before we do that, I just want to orient you to a couple other things on this screen. The zone recommendation statistics section in the center gives you a summary of various model results that Adapten has simulated for each of the zones in the field. This field is fairly simple for demo purposes, and there's only 3 zones, but you can see there's still variation amongst things like total nitrogen loss, where we've got a range of 55 to 70 pounds of N loss that's occurred. Similarly, we show what we call our virtual PSNT, which simulates the nitrate values in the top foot of the soil, and that ranges from 13 to 17 parts per million. You can get details on any one of these zones by simply clicking on the zone on the map and then clicking the View Details link. This gives you detailed, transparent results for what Adapten is using to come up with its recommendation. And if you're interested in more information on this topic, I would recommend you attend one of our Adapten Advanced webinars where we'll go through this in more detail. But just to show you some examples, we simulate things like mineralization that's occurred so far, as well as nitrogen loss that's occurred. And you can view this data over time as well by clicking this graphs link below the map. You can explore this in your own account. It'll show you things like precipitation and nitrogen loss. So I'm going to go back to the field recommendation and show you two other features here. The first is the PDF report. If you click that link, this is going to be a great way for you to share this information with your grower. You can print this out, you can email it to them, and it's going to show you basically the same information you saw on that page, but in a nice packaged printable form. Many of our accounts have custom branding as well. If yours is one of them, the Adaptan logo would actually be replaced by your company's logo. And finally, when it comes time to actually apply nitrogen using the recommendation, you're going to want to run it for the current day. So let's imagine it was side dress time this year and it's June 1st, 2017. We would come and get the most up-to-date recommendation and then click this export link right here. This is going to give us the ability to generate an actual prescription file out of this variable rate Adaptan recommendation. The first option is going to let you choose what type of export you'd like to run. If the field is linked to AgX, as it is in this example, you can send it back there. If it's not, or if you just want it as a shapefile, you can click the shapefile option. You can then name the shapefile whatever you want, or use our default name. So I might call this side dress rec. And then I can choose the type of nitrogen we want to apply this as. Let's say we're applying 28%. You can optionally modify the recommendation by putting a minimum, maximum, or you can raise or lower it by a percentage or a number of pounds. And then you can see the updated values here. And you can even adjust the individual rates. Once you hit that export link, it's going to give you a shapefile to download, as well as a load sheet PDF, which shows you how much product you need. In this case, how many gallons of 28% to fulfill that recommendation. So that's how you can actually make use of it to apply in the field. Now, as the season progresses, you can monitor your fields on a daily basis by clicking the summary icon in the left navigation bar. Now, this is going to give you a single page view of all your growers, your farms, and your fields, the current status and growth stage of them, as well as the current recommendation. Now, I'm showing V0 because none of my fields have been planted yet, but as the season progresses, you'll see that growth model update. But more importantly, the fields that are shown in red are the ones that need nitrogen right now. And if I click on any of those links associated with the recommendation, that's going to take me to the field and show me the current day's value. And this is a different field from what we looked at before, but you can see this is the recommendation for today because I had activated this field a couple days ago, so this one is running live right now. Now, the other thing you can do is you can go ahead and turn on what we call our nitrogen alert feature. I'm going to go ahead and click settings here, and I'm going to click the first option for change my profile. This is where you can change things like your phone number, your email address. But you can also turn on what we call nitrogen alerts by checking these boxes here. We allow for alerts to be sent every day of the week, and you can get them by email and or text message, and you can choose when you want them to start and when you want them to finish. And alerts, actually for the whole system, turn on April 1st. So if you're interested in this, you can start getting alerts as early as Saturday. And then you say, all right, I want to get my emailed alerts every day and I want text messages on Monday. And what that's going to do when you hit update is it's going to cause any field with a recommendation that exceeds the threshold for each grower to fire off an alert to you. And I'll go back to this grower list. And when I created that demo grower here, I'm going to go back into that grower for a second. There was one more field that I didn't talk about, but here it is. It's the nitrogen alert threshold that you can set to determine when those alerts get sent out. The default value is 40, which means you will get alerts on that grower's fields if any part of their fields or zones is at or higher than 40 pounds for the current day's recommendation. If you always wanted to get alerts, you can set that to 0 and save it. Those alerts will basically get sent to you directly. They also have the option to get sent to your growers if you'd like. That's something that your administrator can configure for you. So finally, I want to talk about help and how you can access additional resources on these and other topics. For starters, when you first log in, you land on this page, and the very first link up at the top takes you to our Getting Started guide, which basically goes through a written and visual explanation of everything I just went through. The second link takes you to our help site, adaptn.com/help. And if you click that, you'll see, first of all, up at the top, a link to our help center, and then a link to submit a support ticket. Down at the bottom is system updates and announcements. So what I recommend you do when you have a chance is go to this help center, and you can browse through different topics on things like importing shapefiles. And this will take you through an example of how to zip up your shapefile, how to drag it into the system. In some cases, there's videos. In other cases, there's descriptions. So there's a lot of information there for you. And there's also the ability to submit a support request up at the top of that page, where you can basically, if you're having an error or a problem, you can request that we look at that for you. And there's also the option to attach a file, maybe it's a shapefile or a screenshot. You can also contact us by emailing support@adaptn.com. One thing we ask is that if you are having a problem with a field of any sort, please tell us the name of that field, the grower, farm, and field ideally, or give us the URL that you're looking at. That will allow us to more quickly address your question. Please, throughout the season, don't hesitate to send us your feedback. If there's a question you have or something you feel like could be made easier or stronger, just go ahead and send us an email at that support@adaptn.com email address. So we look forward to working with you. Wish everyone a successful season, and thanks again for attending today. Take care.